The wait is officially over. The 2024 European League of Football season is here, with 17 teams from 9 countries competing for the championship. The best of the best from across the continent will clash in a battle for gridiron supremacy. From the reigning champion, the Rhein Fire, to a great story in the Stuttgart Surge, every team has a story to tell and a title to chase. With a new season comes new rivalries, new heroes, and new moments that will leave you breathless. The European League of Football, where passion meets competition, and the thrill of victory is always within reach. So, let's get ready for kickoff.
6th place, the Hamburg Sea Devils, 3-9.
The first 2 years for the Hamburg Sea Devils was nothing short of incredible, after being a 2-time runner-up in the first 2 seasons of the league, which was an incredible accomplishment. Unfortunately for them, they suffered their first losing season in team history last year, and their final record was 4 wins and 8 losses, and that was by far their worst campaign in their history. In that season, they played a total of 10 games against teams with a winning record, and they won 2 of those games. Also, their offense wasn't that great, ranking 12th in points scored, and their defense was the bright spot, ranking 8th in points allowed. This year, Hamburg's schedule will be the 8th toughest overall, with a 54% opponents winning percentage. For the new upcoming season, the team is starting with new coaches and players, and the roster is going to look a lot different this year. The Sea Devils this season are going into a rebuild, which they are going to have growing pains throughout the year, and they will miss the playoffs again this season.
5th place, the Cologne Centurions, 4-8.
The Cologne Centurions have been a struggling franchise, with only 1 winning record to show for, and that was in the first year of the league. Since then, they have been one of the worst teams in the league, by having a combined record of 7 wins and 17 losses. Last season's record was 4 wins and 8 losses, and they were the only team to not win a single conference game all season long. During that season, they played a total of 6 games against teams with a winning record, in which they went winless in those games. They had the 3rd worst offense in points scored, and their defense last year was much better, ranking 9th in points allowed. Their strength of schedule is going to be the 5th toughest in the league this year. This season, their roster is going to be much better overall. So I suspect that this team will be on the rise, and we will see how much better they are going to be this year.
4th place, the Madrid Bravos, 5-7.
The Madrid Bravos are the newest expansion team in the league this season. They will be the 2nd franchise in the country of Spain, and the other team is the Barcelona Dragons, which will become a great rivalry between these 2 teams. For their first ever season in the European League of Football, the team is doing a lot of things right. They signed former Vienna Vikings quarterback Chris Helvetic, who is a top 10 quarterback going into this season, and has experience in this league. The team does have a better homegrown talent on their roster compared to the Barcelona Dragons, and it will be interesting to see how the team comes together. For this season, their strength of schedule is going to be the 10th toughest in the league this year. By all means, I think that in their first season, they are going to be a competitive team, but will fall short on making the playoffs this year.
3rd place, the Paris Musketeers, 7-5.
The 2023 season for the Paris Musketeers was their first ever campaign in team history, but it wasn't that memorable because they didn't play to expectations. During that campaign, they were considered to be a title contender, but they missed out on making the playoffs and barely finished with a winning record. Their final record was 6 wins and 6 losses, and originally they started out the campaign with a record of 2-6, which they won the final 4 games of the season. Their offense ranked 7th in points scored, and their defense ranked 8th in points allowed last year. This roster is going to be pretty good overall, and they do have one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league. Their strength of schedule is going to be the toughest in the entire league this year, with an opponent winning percentage of 61%. With the talent on this team for the upcoming season, I believe that they are going to be very good, and I suspect that they will be in the hunt for a playoff spot all year long.
2nd place, the Frankfurt Galaxy, 8-4.
The Frankfurt Galaxy last season proved that they were one of the top teams, being tied for the 3rd best record at 10 wins and 2 losses. Since their first season back in 2021, the team has had a winning record in every campaign in their history, with one championship coming in 2021. Last season, they made the playoffs after missing it the year before, and in that playoff appearance, they made it to the semifinals against the Rhein. Unfortunately, they lost that game 42-23. Also, the Galaxy ranked 6th in points scored, and their defense ranked 6th in points allowed. In 2024, their strength of schedule is going to be the 7th toughest in the league. For this season, they pressed the reset button on offense, and now they have a new quarterback, new running back, new wide receivers, but this roster overall is still very talented. So my prediction is that the Frankfurt Galaxy will be a really competitive team and will fight for one of those wild card spots this season.
First place, the Rhein Fire, 12-0.
The Rhein Fire are the reigning champions, and that was the best ever season in league history. In that championship game they played against the Stuttgart Surge, they won that game by a score of 53-34. Also during that season, they were one of two teams that went undefeated, but were the only team to finish the whole campaign unbeaten. The Fire had the best overall offense in points scored, and their defense was the third best unit in points allowed. Their schedule this season will be the 9th easiest strength of schedule, with an opponent winning percentage of 53%. The Fire's roster is now even more scarier this year than the previous season, which they won that championship. This year, their roster will have 2 former NFL players, and the team also has the best quarterback in the league named Jadrian Clark, who is the reigning league MVP. I absolutely think that the Fire are the team to beat this season, and are definitely championship contenders.
Sixth place, the Barcelona Dragons, 2-10.
The Barcelona Dragons had by far their worst season in team history last year, which they finished as the 3rd worst team in the league. Their record last season was 2 wins and 10 losses, and they started out the campaign undefeated through their first 2 games, but then they lost the final 10 games of the season. So far through their history, they have had only one winning campaign in 2022, which was also their only playoff appearance. Their offense was the 5th worst unit in points scored, and their defense was the 3rd worst overall unit in points allowed. Barcelona's strength of schedule this year is going to be the 6th easiest in the league. For 2024, the team has one of the worst overall rosters in the league. But on the bright side, they do have one of the top young quarterbacks, who has the potential to be like Zach Edwards 2.0 for the Spanish franchise. I suspect that the Dragons are going to be major underdogs this season, and they will struggle, but show some promise with their young QB.
Fifth place, the Helvetic Mercenaries, 3-9.
The Helvetic Guards are no more. Instead, it's the new team from Switzerland, the Helvetic Mercenaries. The team went through a wild offseason with a new ownership, a new team name, and a new team infrastructure. Their first head coach of the new franchise is going to be former Istanbul Rams head coach Val Gunn. And if someone knows how to maneuver through a difficult situation with a team, it's going to be him. This season, their roster is almost the same as last year, and is led by Swiss homegrown hero Tim Henny and promising talent Carlton Aiken. Their strength of schedule is going to be the 6th toughest in the European League of Football this year. With this new season comes different expectations, and I believe that they could be a competitive team and should show some promise this year.
Fourth place, the Milano Seamen, 4-8.
The Milano Seamen are coming off their first season in the European League of Football last year, which wasn't memorable at all. During that season, they finished with a record of 2 wins and 10 losses, which put them as the 4th worst team in the league. In that campaign, they played a total of 8 games against teams with a winning record, and they went winless in those games. Last season, their defense was the worst unit in points allowed, and their offense ranked 9th in points scored. Their strength of schedule this season will be the 4th easiest in the league. Milano was almost able to keep their entire roster together, and overall they had a solid offseason, which they added a new quarterback and a former Seattle Seahawks wide receiver Patrick Carr. By all means, I think that the team will show some promise in the new campaign, but will miss the playoffs again this year.
Third place, the Tirol Raiders, 7-5.
The Tirol Raiders have been a pretty successful team since they joined the league back in 2022. So far through their first 2 seasons, they have had 2 winning campaigns, and they made the playoffs just once in 2022. Last season, their record was 8 wins and 4 losses, and they barely missed out on the playoffs by a small margin. Also, during that season, they played a total of 6 games against teams with a winning record, and they won 2 of those games. Their offense ranked 10th in points scored, and their defense was the 5th best unit in points allowed. And the reason why they missed out on the playoffs was because of the point differential last year. This season, their strength of schedule will be the 7th easiest in the league. They underwent some major changes in the offseason by losing some key players, and they also added a new head coach. And I think that this roster is still pretty talented overall, and they did add a new quarterback, which he could be the best QB for them since Sean Shelton. This season, I believe that the Raiders are going to be a playoff contender all year long.
Second place, the Munich Ravens, 9-3.
The Munich Ravens surprised us last season in their first ever campaign in team history, finishing with a winning record, which was impressive for an expansion team. Their record last season was 7 wins and 5 losses. Unfortunately for them, they did miss out on the playoffs. In that season, they did play a total of 6 games against teams with a winning record, but only won 1 of those games. Their offense was the 2nd best overall unit in points scored, and their defense ranked 10th in points allowed. This season, their strength of schedule is going to be the easiest in the entire league. Their roster is one of the best overall units this season, and they do have one of the best overall quarterbacks in the league. The Munich Ravens will have a strong offense that can score a lot of points, and I suspect that they will be a playoff team in the new season.
First place, the Stuttgart Surge, 11-1.
Until last season, the Stuttgart Surge have been in the basement in terms of wins since the league got started back in 2021. That all changed last season when we saw the Surge have their best ever season in team history by making their first championship game appearance. In that championship game, they played against the Rhein. Unfortunately, they lost that game 53-34. During the regular season, their record was 10 wins and 2 losses, and they finished as the 3rd best team. Their schedule last season featured 6 total games against teams with a winning record, and they won 5 of those games. They had the 4th best offense in points scored, and their defense ranked 7th in points allowed. This season, their strength of schedule is going to be the 2nd easiest this year. Stuttgart's roster is one of the best in the entire league, and they do have a top 5 quarterback in Riley Hennessy this year. So my prediction is that the Stuttgart Surge are going to be one of the strongest teams this season, and are championship contenders.
Fifth place, the Prague Lions, 2-10.
The Prague Lions played their first ever season in the European League of Football last year, which was not memorable at all. Their record last season was 1 win and 11 losses, which made them the worst overall team in the entire league. Also during that season, they had the worst offense in points scored, and their defense was the 2nd worst unit in points allowed. Their strength of schedule is going to be the 4th toughest this year. During the offseason, the Lions restructured their organization, and that will probably help them perform at a higher level this season compared to the previous year. So for the new season, I suspect that the Prague Lions are going to struggle again this year, but should be a better team overall.
Fourth place, the Fehervar Enthroners, 3-9.
The Enthroners last season were another new team to the European League of Football, and they really struggled through that campaign. Their final record during that season was 3 wins and 9 losses, and 2 of those wins came from games that were forfeited by the opposing teams, naming the Prague Lions in Week 8 and the Leipzig Kings in Week 11. Their one natural win came against the Lions in Week 12. During the season, their offense wasn't that great, ranking 11th in points scored, and their defense wasn't good at all, being the 3rd worst unit in points allowed. For the new season, their strength of schedule is going to be the 5th easiest in the league. By all means, I think that they should be a better team overall, and maybe they could surprise us for the upcoming season.
Third place, the Wrocław Panthers, 8-4.
The Wrocław Panthers had their best ever season in team history last year, and they also made their 2nd ever playoff appearance. During the regular season, their record was 8 wins and 4 losses, and they finished as the 6th seed. In the playoffs, they made it to the wild card against the Stuttgart Surge. Unfortunately, they lost that game 37-14. Their schedule last season featured 4 total games against teams with a winning record, and they won only one of those games. The Panthers' offense last year ranked 5th in points scored, and their defense ranked 4th in points allowed. Their roster is going to be one of the best in the league during the new campaign. So my prediction is that the Panthers are going to be a title contender all season long.
Second place, the Berlin Thunder, 8-4.
The Berlin Thunder had their best ever season in team history last year by making their first ever playoff appearance. In the playoffs, they played against the Frankfurt Galaxy in the wild card. Unfortunately, they lost that game 20-3. Their record during the regular season was 8 wins and 4 losses, which 4 of those games came against teams with a winning record, and they won one of those games. Berlin's offense was one of the better overall units in the game, ranking 7th in points scored. Their defense was absolutely a beast, ranking 2nd in points allowed. This season, their strength of schedule will be the 3rd toughest in the league. Berlin will have a pretty good roster for the upcoming season, which features some really talented players. I absolutely think that the Berlin Thunder are going to be a playoff contender, and maybe could possibly win their first championship this year.
First place, the Vienna Vikings, 10-2.
The Vienna Vikings have been the golden standard in the European League of Football since they joined the league back in 2022. Last season for them was no different. They went unbeaten during the regular season and made their 2nd consecutive playoff appearance in a row. In the playoffs, they played against the Stuttgart Surge in the semifinals. Unfortunately, they lost that game 40-33. Their offense was the 3rd best overall unit in points scored, and their defense was the very best in the entire league in points allowed. This season, their strength of schedule will be the 3rd easiest in the league. Vienna's roster is really talented and should be a top 3 overall roster going into the new season. So I believe that the Vienna Vikings are going to be one of the top teams to win the championship this year. Now let's go to the playoffs. And here's my playoff bracket. In the wildcard round, the Berlin Thunder versus the Munich Ravens. My pick to win this game is the Munich Ravens. The Wrocław Panthers versus the Vienna Vikings. My pick to win this game is the Vienna Vikings. Now in the semifinals, the Munich Ravens versus the Rhein Fire. My winner is going to be the Rhein Fire. The Vienna Vikings versus the Stuttgart Surge. My pick to win this playoff game is the Stuttgart Surge. The European League of Football Championship game. The Stuttgart Surge versus the Rhein Fire. This championship game is going to be a rematch of last year's championship game, where the Rhein Fire defeated the Stuttgart Surge 53-34. This game is going to be another awesome championship matchup. So my pick to win the 4th ever European League of Football Championship is the Stuttgart Surge, which would be their first title in team history.
So those are my predictions for the European League of Football this season. Who do you think will win the championship this year? Let me know down in the comment section. If you're new, please consider subscribing and also hit that notification bell. And if you love sports, this is definitely the place for you. And also share this video with more sports fans. For more European League of Football videos, please click up here. And thank you so much for watching. My name is Nathan. I'll see you guys all next time. Just keep loving sports.